কোন আলোতে প্রাণের প্রদীপ জ্বালিয়ে তুমি ধরায় আসো, কোন আলোতে প্রাণের প্রদীপ জ্বালিয়ে তুমি ধরায় আসো, সাধক গো প্রেমিক গো পাগল।
Thank you, Carla, for inviting me in the first place to mark the 184th death anniversary of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. And it was very kind of her to ask me to represent the Brahmo Samaj, which evolved from the Brahmo Sabha, and the Brahmo Sabha was founded by Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Now, the Raja was not somebody who had mystical powers. He did not claim to be son of God. He did not claim to be God. He was, however, an extraordinary man. And the title of my lecture today is Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Evolution. Now, before you start thinking that I'm going to say that he formulated the theory of evolution before Charles Darwin did, let me set your mind at risk. I will not. Where evolution comes into the story for Raja Ram Mohan Roy is the way that he evolved uniquely during his lifetime. In this respect, I would like to cover the following three aspects of his life: religious views, commercial sense, social campaigns. Now, we all know how his religious thinking led to the foundation of the Brahmo Samaj. The question that I want to address today is how he made that journey. He was born in Radhanagar in West Bengal, and he was born into a very devout Brahmin family in 1772. As a child, he himself was also very devout. In the morning, he wouldn't drink water, for example, until he had recited some verses from the Bhagavata Purana. That particular book contains many stories about Krishna's childhood. So it will not come as a surprise to you when I say that Ram Mohan was an ardent devotee of Krishna in his childhood. In this context, I'd like to recount a story of Ram Mohan in his childhood. In Bengal, as in many parts of the world in the pre-cinema TV era, a common form of entertainment involved groups of traveling players. These plays are called jatras in Bengali. And young Ram Mohan used to be an avid fan of jatra. During one such jatra, there was a scene where Radha and Krishna were parting. It was a very sad scene. And young Ram Mohan was so moved that it is reported he burst into tears. You can imagine how involved he was with the Radha Krishna story at that stage of his life. So how does he evolve from being this devout child to questioning religious customs and practices? The answer really lies in the mind of the little child. Now, all of you either have had children or know lots of children, and children, as you know, are very curious. They ask questions like why, and if you're a parent like I am, it's a bit difficult at times when the child repeatedly asks you why. And that's the sort of conversation young Ram Mohan had with his father. His father, by the way, was called Ramakanta Rai. And those of you who are familiar with the history of India at this time will remember that Bengal was still ruled by the Nawab of Bengal, albeit under British direction. Well, Ram Mohan's father worked for the Nawab and was an intelligent and educated man. But Ram Mohan was very curious. He would keep pressing his father for answers to his religious questions. Apart from why, his other favorite word was kintu. Kintu, for those of you who don't know Bengali, means but. So, why this? Why that? But what about that? That's the sort of conversation Ram Mohan would have as a boy. And we're talking about a time when he is somewhere between 10 and 14 years old at this stage. He's always questioning. He's also very intense. He's highly intelligent, has a really good memory. But for me, it wasn't all of this alone that helped him to evolve. It was his questioning and his independent mind that was really the key to how he developed himself and how he questioned the status quo in religious thinking. So let's review the impact that Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and the exposure to Western thought had on him. Well, with regard to Hinduism, around this time his education included Bengali in a little school locally, but he wasn't always satisfied with that little school. They gave him some answers, but not all of them. And at home he continued his arguments with his parents, especially his father, and he became very frustrated. Now, as all of you know, Buddhism is close to Hinduism, so it was natural for him to cast his net a little bit wider. So he began to find out more about Buddhism. And of course, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, or Ram Mohan Roy in that stage, of course, of his life, wasn't an ordinary child. He just didn't restrict himself to reading some books. No, he decided to go to Tibet. And why did he go to Tibet? Well, there were lots of Buddhist monasteries there. That's why he went to Tibet. Okay, so in terms of his family, at the same time, you've got to understand that there was not much support from the family as well, because they were not very keen on his son going off to Tibet. And so you can understand how independent a character he was, because he decided to do it himself. All right? By the time he was 18, he became disillusioned with Tibetan Buddhism. He found that, just like his Hindu friends and family, the Buddhists also put a lot more emphasis on their customs. The arguments between Ram Mohan and the Buddhist mentors became more and more heated. It is reported that it got to the stage where his life was actually in danger, and thanks to some Tibetan women, he was smuggled out of the country. Let's move on to Islam now. Ram Mohan also spent some time in Patna during his youth. This is where he learnt about Islam. Of course, Ram Mohan, as I've said, was no ordinary student. In order to read the original Islamic texts, what did he do? Well, he learned Persian, he learned Arabic. And he found the Sufi form of Islam particularly attractive. Ideas about there being one God and finding God through spirituality resonated with him. It should be noted that this was also one of the first times in his life that he was exposed to Western thought. And you might ask why. Well, originally people like Aristotle, Plato, Euclid wrote in Greek. The Romans in turn kept alive that body of work and indeed added to it. However, at the end of the Roman Empire, we had the Dark Ages in Western Europe. But at the same time, the Islamic world was growing, and the Muslim scholars translated many of those texts into Arabic. So it was in Patna, through Arabic, that Ram Mohan's curious mind got the first injection of Western thought. Now let me turn to his mother. I've talked a lot about his father, but let me talk about his mother. Now her name was Tarini Devi. Imagine that your son is going off to faraway places to learn about other religions, but not your own. So she insisted that he goes to Benares or Varanasi to learn Sanskrit. This gave him yet another view of religion. He devoured the ancient Hindu texts very eagerly. Out of those texts, 3 texts, collectively known as the Vedanta Shastras, influenced him most. These were the Brahma Sutras, the Gita, and the Upanishads. He was particularly taken by the purity of monotheistic doctrines, which were quite different from the polytheistic idol worship prevalent in India at the time. And the last bit of the evolutionary trail as far as religious thought is concerned involves learning English. A lot of the texts that were written by Raja Ram Mohan Roy and are available to us right now are in English. However, it is amazing to learn that he actually started to study English at the late age of 24. And of course, this is an era where the British are expanding their control of India, and much of the governance and commerce involved English. So he continued to learn English, and at the age of 29 got a job in East India Company. Now, having learned English allowed him to engage with Christian missionaries in Sirampur. He was keen to learn about the Christian beliefs, and thus began an intense period of Bible study. And as I pointed out before, Ram Mohan didn't study superficially. He learned Hebrew, he learned Syriac, he learned Greek in order to read the original text. And he began to trace the development of Jewish and Christian doctrines in order to assess the evolution of religious thought. And in my lecture here 3 years ago, I mentioned how Ram Mohan was influenced by the liberal thinkers like John Locke and Jeremy Bentham. And these thinkers set the stage for the Unitarians to take root in Britain. And Ram Mohan was attracted to the Unitarians during the latter part of his life, and he found that their ideas of only one God resonated with those of his own. Now, all this evolution from a devout Hindu boy eventually culminated in Ram Mohan founding the Brahmo Sabha in 1828, and that was the precursor to the Brahmo Samaj. Now, I spent a fair amount of time talking about Ram Mohan's religious evolution, but one mustn't forget that he was also a man of commerce. During his lifetime, his career varied from landowner to moneylender to newspaper publisher to Diwan, which is a tax collector, and even ambassador for the Mughal emperor. The secret to success was to evolve as his circumstances changed. And the third aspect that Ram Mohan was famous for was his work on social and educational issues. He realized that if India was to take its place as a modern nation, it needed scientific education. This is why he had advocated for the teaching of English. He founded probably the first school for Indians to learn English in 1830. He was also the first Indian to publish a newspaper in India in 1821. And after the suffering caused by seeing his sister-in-law burnt alive on her husband's funeral pyre, he campaigned to have the terrible practice of sati banned, and he succeeded in 1829. In conclusion, the key theme in Raja Ram Mohan's life was his ability to evolve in different spheres, and it is a lesson that we can all take from his unique life. Thank you.
God.